Welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's MDM Webcast, How Distributors are Managing Online versus Offline Pricing Challenges. Our 60-minute program is sponsored by Oracle NetSuite and Pros. My name's Tom Gale. I'm the CEO of Modern Distribution Management and website mdm.com. I have the pleasure of moderating today's program. We're excited today to share the results of our latest survey and analysis of how distributors are tackling pricing challenges between their channels. B2B distributors have a more complex set of variables to manage when it comes to pricing online versus offline. And our speakers have some fantastic insight today into what to watch for and how to manage this issue more effectively. Before I introduce our speakers, a few brief housekeeping notes. If you'd like to access the handouts for today's program, as you see at the top of your screen right now, please go to mdm.com/slides and download them, or email us at info@mdm.com and we'll send them to you as a PDF attachment. Today's program is being recorded, and we'll be sending you a follow-up link to this recording to share it with your colleagues or listen to it again. We encourage you to submit questions throughout today's presentation to be addressed in a Q&A at the end. In the interest of time, we won't be taking questions by phone, but please use the chat function on the bottom left of your screen to ask a question at any time, or if you're experiencing any technical issues. Simply type your question into the chat window at the bottom left and hit the Enter key. Finally, you can make the slides larger and view our presentation today in full screen mode by clicking the button in the top right of your screen that says Full Screen. You can return to the normal size by hitting your Escape key. With that, I'm delighted to welcome today's speakers. Ian Heller is President and COO of Modern Distribution Management. He began his distribution career as a truck unloader in a Granger branch in college. He left that company 15 years later as Marketing Vice President and has held senior executive positions in marketing and e-commerce at GE Capital Rail, Newark Electronics, Corporate Express, and most recently as VP Marketing for HD Supply Whitecap. Ian also founded and ran Real Results Marketing, a distribution-focused consultancy, for 7 years. Austin Garrison is the founder and managing partner of the private equity firm Concourse Capital. Concourse is a research-based investment firm focused on middle-market private companies. He's an accredited chartered financial analyst and consults on projects requiring intensive analytical and research capabilities. Austin holds an MBA from the University of California, Berkeley, and a BS in engineering from Colorado State University. Welcome, gentlemen. I'd also like to give you a brief overview of our sponsors for today's program. For those of you not familiar with NetSuite, NetSuite was founded in 1998 as the first cloud company. 20 years later, NetSuite now has over 16,000 customers. Their business management suite functionality includes ERP, financials, CRM, inventory management, warehouse management, e-commerce, and more, all on the same cloud platform. NetSuite supports organizations of all sizes, from emerging companies to some of the largest global enterprises. NetSuite remains the fastest growing financial management platform in the world. Their proven, reliable, and scalable success is what caught the attention of Oracle and led to their acquisition back in late 2016. NetSuite continues to thrive within Oracle, adding 3,000 additional brands last year with customers in over 203 countries and territories. I'd also like to welcome Pros. Many distributors are still working with manual processes, gut feel pricing and processes, static segmentation, and excessive discounting. Pros has been helping distributors improve their margin for many years through the application of AI-driven price optimization and gain an initial average margin improvement of 300 to 400 basis points. They've also helped grow and protect revenue by improving sales processes and buying experiences across all channels. Please visit the MDM and Pros websites where you'll find white papers, research, and recordings of webinars where Pros and MDM have worked together to help distributors address these challenges. Thank you to both sponsors. Ian, I'm excited to hear the analysis you and Austin have been working hard to pull together.
Thank you, Tom. So the way this is going to work is Austin's going to cover the specific quantitative results of the survey, and then I'll provide some color commentary along the way. So go ahead, Austin.
Thank you, Ian, and also thank you, Tom, for that introduction, and extend my welcome as well to everyone on the call. The first slide you see in front of you really covers the demographics of the survey. We had nearly 250 respondents to our survey, and they identified primarily as owner, CEO, president, or people in a management or decision-making capacity. 58% of the respondents are distributors, 23% are manufacturers, and the remainder is either a combination or a service provider to the industry. The second pie chart up there on the right looks at the business sectors as represented, and we have good representation throughout the distribution industry, larger number in industrial and MRO, but you can see that all sectors are represented. A comment for you, housekeeping-wise, as we proceed forward. Each slide contains an N figure. In this case, it's in the upper left-hand corner. This one's N equals 199. Because some participants opted not to answer all questions, or the questions weren't relevant to their business, that number of respondents for each question will change, and we note that throughout the slides here. Starting first on customer motivation, whether you're selling online or selling through traditional channels, our survey asked about a number of different factors here, and these are all clustered in a fairly limited range as far as what customers consider the most important issues are to buy from a distributor. And most of these I would classify as the value-added components within the distribution community, things like reputation, quality of products, technical and expertise, et cetera. You will notice at the right of the chart, second from the last, is price, which indicates that price, while it is a factor, is not the deciding factor or the most important factor that clients use to make decisions. Now, of course, this means that doesn't mean that price is not an issue. It remains a significant component of closing a sale, but it's less important than other factors identified in this survey.
We also had a question where people could give their own responses to answer what other buyer motivations are driving your customers to buy from you. Interestingly, on the left, there were 10 of them out of 20 that were about relationships, brand strength, which is, I think, to some degree about relationships. But we did get one response that I wanted to throw in there, which was inertia. And that's probably a little bit more prevalent than came out in the data. And I also think that as you go through as you see the slides today, what you'll see is distributors are struggling to bring forward a lot of services and other things that actually are fundamental to building these relationships onto their website channel. And so these are factors about why people buy from distributors, generally speaking. The question is, can you differentiate with these factors in your online presence? Because you need to do that in order to be able to price that into your products. And so we'll go through some of that, but I think it's clear that relationships are leveraging their brands and their reputation and their relationships, but they're struggling to do that online in a way that allows them to charge for it and get margin for it.
Now, all companies will have some level of an online presence, whether they do online sales or not. And we asked the question of what are the benefits of this online exposure. And again, we see a range of responses which tend to be close together. On the left side, we have detailed product information and sales support, followed by some other factors. And then you see the sales issues down there sort of in the middle. But again, these are all relatively closely spaced together, which indicates to us that most of the participants in the distribution industry are looking at their online strategy to fulfill multiple goals, not just solely information and not just online sales.
I would say one of the reasons that providing detailed product information and sales support ranked highest here is that, as you'll see later on in the research, there are a whole bunch of distributors that actually do not sell online at all. So online sales is artificially depressed here versus what may be ideal for distributors because they literally can't offer it. And so if you can't sell online, then providing detailed product information and sales support is going to score disproportionately high as a goal or benefit. And I think that's one of the reasons it scored so high here.
Now, most firms are accustomed to establish sales targets for their sales channels, sales personnel, et cetera. We wanted to see how much this translated to an online experience. So again, for those firms that are actually doing online sales, we asked if they had specific targeted financial goals for this process. And interestingly, 60% said no, there's not a breakout goal for online sales. They really view it as a contribution to their overall traditional sales channels. 40%, however, do have established goals for their online presence. And among that 40%, the average stated target is nearly 30% at 29% of total sales. And again, this is a goal. We don't have information on what they're actually achieving in this area, but that is a material goal within the overall sales profile of a distributor.
Yeah, I think if you have the ability to sell online, you should have a sales goal for it. I understand that it's hard to measure that in many cases, but if you do have online sales capability and you don't have a goal for it, my philosophy is you should set one. And there is a gap between the percentage of distributors who have the ability to sell online and a fewer amount who have a goal set for that channel.
Now, as most of you know from your own personal experiences, there are a host of challenges to a successful online strategy. This chart shows the responses to that question as far as rating the different factors of challenges experienced. And pricing comes out, and you'll see that throughout this presentation, that pricing is identified as one of the top issues. Again, though, we have a number of issues that are all clamoring for attention here among those implementing an online strategy. Interestingly, on the right side of this chart, you'll see lack of support, two bars there that are lower as far as a measure of importance, both internally through the sales team and also internally through executive support. So those have, our impression is those have come down from previous levels where that's less of an issue, but certainly has not gone away.
This is Tom. Ian, there's a question that came up here, and this is on the previous slide that was related to percent of total sales. Are punch-out catalogs integrated? Do sales through punch-out catalogs get considered as online sales?
Yeah, so like a punch-out, through a client ERP and a procurement platform, et cetera. I've seen some distributors do measure that or consider that an online sale. Some distributors will actually lump in all EDI sales as part of their online sales. Other people will say, no, that's really an established channel that has nothing to do with online technology. It's just an order placement mechanism. And I would say that for the purposes of this research, we didn't separate it out. So I don't really know. I think that's we'll undoubtedly redo this research, and that'll be a wrinkle we can add to get more detail. I would say for an individual distributor, you just need to be clear about what you're setting a goal for that's in alignment with your strategy, that is driven by customer needs. And if your customers need EDI and they need punch-out, or they need to buy from you on a website, or through a specific set of SKUs you've set up, you should set the goal around that and measure your progress to the goal. I don't think it matters what you call it, but I do think, when we redo this research, we can sort of parse it out by, EDI, e-procurement, website, et cetera. So it's a good question. Now, we have some commentary on this last slide, and it's interesting because the two biggest challenges that came out were pricing consistency across channels and then also technology issues. And then the third biggest challenge is probably an outcome of the first two, which is providing a good online customer experience. And those are, I just think, keys or indicators that distributors have got to catch up in terms of technology. And this gets back to the measurement problem, because if you're not measuring or trying to estimate the benefit of your online sales, then it's impossible to justify the investment because you can't measure an ROI. And so those kinds of investment proposals, and I've made them before in my career, are competing with the option of not spending the money and bringing that cost, which is known, to the bottom line as EBITDA. And so it's really incumbent on the e-commerce and marketing people to collaborate with finance, sales, et cetera, and set goals and at least find a way to estimate the benefit so you can build a business case to justify the investment. I know exactly how hard that is. I've lived it for many years, but that doesn't excuse you from the need to make an attempt to do it. The good news, though, is we no longer see lack of support from sales or executives as a real barrier, and those used to be really problems, or really big problems, where the salespeople would push back, where the executives really weren't willing to support it. I think more of what I'm seeing now is executives are willing to support online investments. They want to know, why. What's the return that we will get if we make the investment, at least in an estimated fashion? What's the competitive environment that's driving it? I think marketers and e-commerce people need to be very adept at building business cases and enrolling the finance department to help them do that so that they can demonstrate that the business case is sound. But if you don't do that, you're not going to have the technology necessary to compete in a marketplace that's increasingly requiring digital capabilities.
Now, for those companies doing online sales, we asked the question on their approach to the marketplace if they use a proprietary site, one that's branded with the firm name and firm identity, or they're going through a third-party marketplace where their name and products are commingled with others. There are two charts here, one showing all responses on the left. On the right are distributors only. As you can see, the large majority of responses firms are using a proprietary site. That number actually increases to 65% for distributors only. A smaller number will use a marketplace either as a support to their proprietary site or as their sole access to online sales. But it's a fairly small number. Of those who reported selling on marketplaces, Amazon through Amazon Business or Amazon.com, Walmart, and eBay were identified as their partners.
Yeah, so frankly, the only number that surprised me here, or I guess I found to be alarming, was on the left, where you have a large percentage, even taking out the distributors, you have a fairly significant percentage of manufacturers who are selling on their own sites. And I think, you're seeing a lot of channel merging these days. More and more distributors are introducing private label goods. Certainly Amazon is doing that, and Amazon Business, I predict, will grow that portion of their business. And, frankly, more manufacturers are selling direct. And I hear a lot of distributors, who are very happy about, frankly, having their manufacturers direct ship. But when you do that, you're really reducing the value out of a distributor because, taking possession of inventory from a wide variety of manufacturers and then fulfilling small orders out of a large pool of stock is a core distributor function. And I'm really going to be interested what Mark Dancer comes up with in his next NAW Facing the Forces of Change report, because it appears to me that manufacturers are building distribution capabilities, distributors are building manufacturing capabilities, and all of that has been made easier by the continuous development not only of digital technology, but logistics and delivery platforms, which are getting more efficient. So it's going to be really important for distributors to continue to find ways of adding value that go beyond just sourcing and selling product, because these channels continue to merge from my perspective.
Now, as we've already discussed a couple of times on this talk, the value-added nature of the distribution business is something that we're seeing some difficulty translating that online. And we've already talked in this previous slide and earlier on about how important this is to distributors to separate themselves from their competition. However, almost 35% of the respondents to this question do not offer any value-added services with their online sales. A similar number, slightly larger, do offer some customization or configuration of the products, although this is typically considered one of the easier things to do online because frequently that's a checkbox for a size, color, certain configurations, etc. A smaller number offered service packages, extended warranties, credit terms, special delivery, that type of thing. But overall, value-added services are not currently transitioning well to online sales.
Yeah, that none column is pretty disturbing. Really offline, regardless of which channel you're talking about, distributors have always had a hard time figuring out how to charge for services, and they just tended to bundle them in. The problem is that when you just take those prices for where you've built the service into the product and you move them online, you're now competing with a bunch of online sellers who don't offer those services and thus don't build the pricing for those services into the online SKUs, and so you look like you are not as competitive by comparison. So it hurts your sales, and then you're just sort of repurposing your ERP pricing with the bundling built in. And probably worst of all, this ability to add service, which is empowered by this relationship that helps you understand your customers' needs in an in-depth way, has always been a core differentiator for distributors, versus anybody else who sells to these customers, including these digital disruptors. And the bottom line is, over time, distributors are going to need to solve this problem about how do you establish the value of the services that you offer, how do you either unbundle it and make it a line item, or make that value deliverable and thus relevant and something you can charge for on a website, or you need to build your website as a separate channel, maybe even a separate P&L, which some companies have done, like I would say Grainger with Zorro has done that. And now you have a separate P&L, and the sales through that channel are not burdened with an assumption about service costs that really aren't relevant through that independent channel. So, figuring out how to organize your website in terms of a business or a business unit is a discussion I think more distributors need to have, or they need to solve the problem about delivering the services online. So this is an opportunity and also a barrier for online success for a lot of distributors.
Our next question for those who are offering online sales was which of their SKUs are available? What have they decided to put online? And the largest response, although not a majority, was that their entire catalog or all their SKUs are available to purchase online. Smaller numbers had a different, more targeted strategy, either with best-selling products or hot-selling products or loss leaders, that type of thing that would drive traffic. But there's a lack of consistency right now throughout the industry on what is getting placed on online for sale.
Yeah, I think the percentage who are selling their entire catalog has gone up, and I kind of laughed when I saw the data because I have tried over the years to sell bad inventory, that stuff that wouldn't sell through other channels online, and it turns out that whatever it was that was making that inventory unattractive is also applicable on the web, because I never had any luck selling that stuff online in any significant way either. So I think the reality is customers are customers. The nature of product is the nature of product. In my view, you need to put the entire catalog out there to the degree that you're able, and it looks as though that's happening more and more now.
This next question was a follow-on to the previous one. Is once you as a distributor or manufacturer have decided what online items you're putting online, of those items, which ones are you showing pricing, or where do you have a call for pricing or dial into chat for pricing? Interestingly, 35% of the respondents actually require an additional step by their customers, either calling or chatting or some other feature to determine pricing for an item. 65% list that online, so it's a single-step process for the client. But that 35% was a bit higher than we had anticipated.
Yeah, actually, Austin, this is numbers. This is what percentage of your online SKUs, not the percentage of respondents. So the takeaway from this slide is that of all respondents, 65% of the SKUs they list had prices and 35% did not. So we put together some thoughts on that in MDM And my experience is that not pricing SKUs online is a lethal blow to your ability to make your online sales goals. So if you think about it from a customer's perspective, let's say that you try out a website for a distributor and you've got 5 items to buy, you put 4 of them in the cart, and you get to the 5th item and it says call for price. Well, now you feel like your time invested in putting together the online order has been wasted because you have to call the distributor anyway. So, one of 2 things is going to happen. You're either going to sort of abandon the work that you've done online and call the distributor, or you're going to say, the heck with these guys, and you're going to go to somebody else's website. Now, I completely understand the challenge in pricing SKUs online. You've got commodity products and stuff where the price changes fast, but the reality is if you don't price them, then you are going to kill your online sales. And, can you imagine going to a good online store and running into any or at least many products that say call for price? I mean, if you did, you just wouldn't use that website anymore. So I understand the challenges. They're hard to solve, but I think they can be solved. And I think if you're going to put stuff online, you need to price it.
Yeah, Ian, as a comment to that, first I apologize for the confusion on how I described that, but this is a phenomenon that's been researched extensively in the retail community, whereas if there's a barrier to one item, it typically leads to the entire basket being dumped by the client. So you're losing more, as Ian said, you're losing more than that single sale, single SKU. The next question targeted or focused on the how prices are determined for online sale. And the majority of the respondents, nearly 60%, are extracting this from their ERP systems. As most of you know, the ERP, most of the systems do have a module for providing this pricing, but a surprisingly large number, nearly 30%, are doing this process manually. The remainder had some other hybrid process or using third-party consultants or software. Comparison shopping is always an issue or a threat. So comparing your online pricing with competitive sellers is the goal of this next question. A surprising number, nearly 80% of the respondents either do not do any comparison with their competitors or only do spot checking. This was a higher number than anticipated. A very small number, less than 10%, are actually scraping prices online using a software or a third-party product. This scraping prices is actually very, very common in the retail sector, where the competition is constantly on the watch using technology to see what their competition is doing in the marketplace and adjusting their prices based on their own experiences and algorithms.
Yeah, so I wanted to comment on both the slides together, because you've got this asynchronous competition here, because very few distributors are using, I call it advanced techniques here, like price scraping, but actually I remember doing it 20 years ago, so I guess it's not really advanced. It's just sort of, a common practice for either sophisticated distributors or for retailers. But in contrast, pretty much every digital player that you're competing with is scraping your website. So they know what prices you're publishing. They may not know all the logged-in prices, although I've seen people find ways to get around that and get those prices anyway. But they certainly know what you are publishing as your ask price, which in many cases is the price that you are presenting to the customers who are likely to buy online or consider buying from your competitors. So this is not complicated technology. There are many, many competitors out there that you can who have offered technology that you can use. And so this is a reflection of the gap in the technology arms race between incumbent distributors and the disruptors. And the reality is that spot checking is really not a good substitute. It's a manual process, and so to use that in place of what's a relatively inexpensive, easy to install technology, frankly shows, I think, a naivete about what it takes to compete online, even more than an unwillingness to invest. And again, and I keep using this phrase in the takeout box on purpose, websites must be designed to compete with online players. And that means you need to apply technology to measure and react to competitors. That means you need the right technology to build your web platform on. You need the right pricing software that reacts and to real-time data and sets prices in real time. And you need to understand what your competitors are pricing at and let the technology, including AI, do the work behind the scenes rather than hiring an intern to compare prices.
Our next question focused on online pricing compared with the other traditional sales channels that distributors and manufacturers have. The interesting thing here is less than 10% of responses used a lower pricing strategy online. The remainder of these either had a similar price online or actually a higher price online for people who came through that portal to access sales.
We had a question, someone asked for MRO products, can the online prices of competitors be misleading because the competitors may be offering further contracted discounts to their customers, so the net pricing will be very different? Yes, absolutely. But here's the thing, first of all, you've got a lot of competitors out there who either aren't using tiered pricing or they are using tiered pricing and so are you. So by at least knowing what they're publishing, you can estimate what those tiers might be or know what their margins are on their ask price by comparing their ask price to your costs. And you can at least develop some algorithms around how you compare. So some data carefully used is better than no data, and you still in many cases are going to find that your top tier price is being advertised against someone who's not using a tiered structure, and at least you'll know when you're losing out and who you're losing out to. Okay, so that's the answer to that question. Regarding this one about how your pricing compares to other sales channels, so here's the problem. More than 4 times as many distributors report that their online prices are generally higher than prices through other channels versus those that report that their online prices are generally lower. So the reality is, for many distributors, their website is the most expensive way you can buy from them. And customers are not stupid. They know this is the case, and so they won't buy from the website if they can buy from an account manager or they can call in and get a discount over the phone from a friendly inside sales rep. So in other words, distributors are aggressively pushing customers into channels where they can sell product at lower margin and incur higher service costs. So if you sell online, then if you make that price competitive with offline, that means that you can enjoy a little bit better margin, and at the same time, you're not paying someone in your organization to process the order and potentially not paying them a commission, although I would be careful with that last one because you will kill the online channel if it is competing with the inside channel. And so, I think, again, the website's got to compete, not just in functionality, but in price with online players. And this is why people need to talk about it as a separate P&L, or at least set goals around it and support them that allow it to have not just the functionality, but the pricing to be competitive in the very price transparent world of online selling.
Here we are trying to get information on, so again, for those who do online sales in the industry, if they qualify buyers as industry professionals, i.e. as custom selling to the trade typically in standard channels, is the same process applied for online sales. And overall, over 60% of the responses indicated that they either must have a relationship or a proof of a business entity, or those that do have such proof get a different pricing schedule. Less than 40% would sell to anybody online. So there's certainly a split here among the approaches within the industry, even though there's a predominance right now of having a professional relationship. We've discussed tiered pricing already a little bit, but this question focuses on it more directly. And overall, on the bar chart here, you see that 56% of our response said that they use the same tiered pricing online as they use for their other channels. Now, the remainder of the responses use a different pricing strategy or use either that or uniform pricing. Those that had a differing strategy usually had some variation of the tiered strategy or didn't provide details on what their approach was. But we're seeing a lot of carryover on the traditional tiered strategy directly online, with a few experimenting with uniform or other styles of pricing. This question just sort of confirms what the experience has been in other industries, but in general, the vast majority, nearly 80%, said that customers are very aware now of what pricing is within the industry. This isn't a particular surprise, and it's something that echoes the experiences across other industries, both wholesale and retail. And this is a corollary type of question, looking at the close rate for sales. If the greater online pricing, greater consumer knowledge actually increases close rates because there's less price discovery, the time lost in qualifying the buyer and so forth. And again, the majority replied that 60% or so said that yes, this actually has improved our close rate, although we didn't ask about margins in the process. So there is some benefits to having a more educated buyer community out there.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about those last 4 slides sort of in combination because there's some contradiction here. You know, distributors know that if you have online pricing, it can help you close sales. It is becoming more transparent, so it's harder to run and hide with your pricing anyway. They nonetheless show their highest prices online, either deliberately or by default due to their tiered pricing models. In addition, they choose not to price many SKUs. So, you know, the implications of that are that distributors understand that websites can drive sales in all channels, not just, you know, through the shopping cart online, but by helping people put together, you know, POs and write down SKUs and prices. But they're not really implementing strategies to exploit that opportunity. You know, so I guess a couple thoughts on this is, first of all, you need to have pretty robust online pricing practices, and I certainly understand that you can't always put your best price online. In many cases, you actually can't put your best price online, particularly in commodities. But a lot of times what you can do is put some price on there, so at least people can buy, and you will get some sales at a higher margin. And maybe add very clear price messaging and develop better conversion practices. So, you know, for example, you know, let's say that I sell refrigerant online, and that's a commodity, and it fluctuates, and I charge a HVAC contractor a vastly different price than, you know, a apartment building technician who only buys a little bit per year. Well, you know, maybe you go ahead and price that refrigerant online, and you have a message next to it that says, you know, contractor or volume pricing available. If you would like to discuss an annual contract, or if you have a large purchase or would like a quote for a large amount, you know, please call this number. And, you know, that tells the professional that, hey, you know, I can get a better price than this. But in my experience, in a lot of cases, that's not even necessary. I mean, if you're an HVAC distributor and you have refrigerant on your website with a price on it, the professionals all know they're going to get a better price. But at least they have the pricing that they need, or that at least you have pricing for everybody who doesn't fit that category. You get some high margin sales out of it. And then the professionals know that you've got it, and people can put it in their shopping cart if they want to. And it actually encourages, the messaging encourages the professional to call you. So I think, you know, thinking through, okay, what can I do? You know, let's say I figure out up front, or make a determination up front, I'm going to price everything online that I sell online, and hopefully that's everything you sell. And then I'm going to figure out how to manage through the pricing as best as I can, and I'm going to use messaging in places where I think the pricing causes a problem. You know, that sort of holistic solution to online pricing is a lot better than just saying, well, this is kind of hard, I guess I will just put call for a price in, because that is such a showstopper. Okay, so we asked an open-ended question, which is, please share your biggest challenge for pricing SKUs for online sales. We had 121 responses, so I went through every one of them, and I was able to categorize them by sort of what the main point of the verbatim comment was. The top 5 categories were these. The number 1 category on the left was, my biggest challenge is setting and managing online prices. And the representative comment I put on there, and this is verbatim, was, list less or cost plus. It's a question about which price should I use. And then the continuous updating of prices with multiple cost changes annually is a problem, I think is implied there, because we fall behind and the price is incorrect. And look, I've been in environments where you've got, commodity pricing that changes every day, and I get it. But this gets back to being a technology problem, because you can't keep up with this stuff manually. You need to have a systematic way of setting smart prices with good software and good inputs, good data inputs, and then you need processes so that those changes are made in an automated fashion as new data comes in. And there are, plenty of industries that have solved this problem. It's not a lot of distributors have. The next category was online price competitiveness and profitability. And here it was, hard to stay on top of the market. Pricing is incredibly visible, but the reality is it's the same. There are 2 parts to the solution. One is you need to decide who your website is competing with, and is it a separate business, a separate P&L. But in any case, you have to accept that the pricing is incredibly visible and make your decisions about how you're going to compete online in the context of that transparency. The third category was, what's our price? We have this challenge in terms of pricing strategy between channels. So, how do we have a competitive price online, list price they say, that doesn't disrupt our contract counter or call-in business? And interestingly, we had a question that just came in that said, I think a big fear is undercutting existing business by pricing low online and upsetting a relationship B2B offline customer. So here's what I think that means based on my experience. Sometimes when you price big contracts, even for huge customers, you have loss leaders in there. Like, this is really common in the office supplies business, where they'll actually sell the copy paper at a loss and then make up that margin in other areas. So even though it's a multi-million-dollar customer, they're actually paying more for, Post-it notes or whatever than your regular retail customers are, or small business customers are, because you're giving them such a break on the copy paper. And that's a hard problem to solve, right? I mean, if I put those Post-it notes on, or whatever the product is in your industry, at a competitive online price, my contract customers are going to figure out that I've been overcharging them from their perspective for that product, the Post-it notes in this case. And look, this is not an easy challenge to solve, and I get it. I mean, I've been in these industries before where you are forced in these large contracts, at least you believe that you're forced to overcharge in one area to get another area. But the reality is the same transparency that's coming true online is also materializing in other channels. And I think that, to go into a customer and be holistic about where you're making money and where you're not, and just disclosing more about, how you are arriving at these prices also reveals your competitors' practices. Because the reality is, if you're doing that, it's very likely that your competitors are doing the same thing. And the reality is that these big customer relationships, these are sophisticated buyers. And I have seen cases where you just lay your cards on the table and you say, look, like the other people you're getting quotes from, we're actually losing money on these SKUs and making it up on these others. And we want to rebuild a relationship with you that has more integrity and more information, and recognize this pricing transparency is out there. And we want to manage these big relationships one at a time in a more transparent and holistic fashion, which takes a really, really skilled salesperson, of which most distributors like this have some, and may take a very high-level person on your side to meet with a high-level person on their side so that you get a holistic picture. Because if you don't do that, then you're going to pick against succeeding on what's an emerging future online. So I'm not minimizing the scope of the problem, but that is a way that you can address it. At least I've seen that work in some situations. I'm not saying it'll work with every customer. The next was resource barriers, people, data, and technology. As you would expect, system limitations and lack of software. And the reality is, if you have the business case for online sales, because you're measuring somehow, I have some thoughts on that, on what you're getting out of your online sales, then you can build a business case, and that's incumbent on the marketers and e-commerce people to have the skills or get the people with the skills to help them build those business cases. Then you have a better justification to go out and invest in the people and data and technology. You can't just be in the promotions business and marketing. You have to be in the business case business as well. And last was, how do we manage tiered and customer-specific pricing? We post one price for all customers when we really sell at multiple price points. I think we've already talked about that a lot. And the reality is that the world is changing, and you need to find a way to work through it using some of the strategies that we've discussed earlier. Okay, so conclusions, what we see is that distributors are really struggling to incorporate the online channel into their overall strategy. They don't really have the pricing tools and technologies. They're still using a lot of manual processes, and they just are not up to snuff versus leading technology that digital players are wielding. And you have to get up to speed, because it's only going to get worse, right? I mean, with these digital disruptors like Amazon Business entering the market, the expectations from customers are going to continue to climb, and you need to meet them, and you have to invest in the technology, just like you would build a distribution center to support new business. Traditional sales methods like large contracts, will calls, and phone orders are hard to reconcile versus online sales opportunities, and I get that. But the reality is, it's always been hard to measure those. It's when someone walks in and places a will call or an order at the counter, the reality is that you're counting that as a counter order, but it's also showing up often in some sales rep's account package, right? And a branch manager is claiming credit for that, and the marketing department comes along and says, hey, I promoted that order. I'm going to put that in my ROI model on this campaign. And if you add it all up, your $100 million company just measured $300 million in sales, right? Because everybody's taking credit for these sales. That was a problem long before the online channel came along. And I think just like there are strategies for reconciling that measurement across channels and deciding how you parse out credit for an account manager, for a branch manager, for a counter person, for a marketing campaign, you have to be steadfast in your commitment to figure out how you roll the online sales contribution into that sale as well. And you can't take a pass in the online channel or choose against investing in it because you don't know what you're getting for it, just like you wouldn't say, well, I don't really know what I'm getting for that sales rep, so I think I'll fire all my sales reps. I think, not having an online sales goal is a big mistake. I think the implications of marketplaces are relatively unclear, but the reality is that they provide a fantastic tail spend or small order solution for customers because it's basically an assortment that has no end. And I think, finally, by pricing non-competitively or showing SKUs without prices, distributors really cannot achieve an acceptable return on their web or other digital investments. Tom, you want to do a couple of questions?
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And we do have a couple of questions here, and I'll get to them in just a moment. As a reminder, ask a question by typing it into the chat window at the lower left corner of your webcast window, and then hit the send or hit your return key. And we do have about 10 minutes or so, and we've got some great questions here. So let me just kick it off with this. And Matt from Minnesota has a couple questions specifically around the list less and cost plus comments. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? And also, is there one way of pricing, either list less or cost plus that's more prevalent that you've seen and more easy to implement with online presence?
Yeah, well, I think, the reality is the majority of distributors that I've seen do cost plus, right? And a lot of that is because they have highly distributed pricing authority. They're not applying tools to or software tools to their pricing. And if you actually do a distribution chart and show the average markup per transaction, the chart looks like a porcupine, right? You've got a huge number of transactions that got marked up 10%, 15%, 20%, 25%, 30%, and that just shows manual pricing and enormous potential to improve margins, because the reality is a lot of times the customer has no idea what the product should cost. They're trying to get a problem solved, and it really wouldn't make any difference whether or not you marked it up 25% or 26 or 27%. But the reality is that, in a 10% EBITDA business, a 1-point improvement in price is a 10% improvement in bottom line, all other things being equal. And I think that value of 1%, or fighting the fives, as John Gunderson, who's on the MDM team, talks about it, is a really valuable way of growing margin. But ultimately, pricing should be set based on competitive factors and factors specific to the customer and the transaction, and doing that well requires software. And getting more people in your organization out of the pricing business and then putting rules around the people who are still in the position of having pricing authority gets you out of, is it cost plus or list less, because I don't think either way is going to ever optimize your gross margin.
So coming in at a different angle, and this is another question out there, according to the survey, distributors believe that price is one of the least important reasons a customer buys from them. But I also just want to remind, as Austin noted, it's a pretty narrow band across all of the factors that were there. So what's their motivation to provide competitive prices on their website? They'll just lose margins by offering a lower, more competitive price.
Yeah, so I think the reality is that the overall reason that customers don't care about pricing from you is that they're getting services and they're leveraging a relationship with you. Neither of those things is easy to extend online. So when you're selling online, most people are comparing your price to other sources where they can easily do a price comparison, and they are less likely to take into account relationships and services, because those things really are less available online. And so, to say, well, overall, because this question wasn't just about the online channel, it was what are the primary motivations that people buy from you. That was a question about your overall business. And so, yeah, price may not be a big factor to your customers overall. And I think the better distributor you are, the less important you can make that. But the reality is, if you now strip out a big chunk of those services and you are not engaging people in the transaction, and you're just doing an online sale of a SKU and you're competing with other websites that do the same thing, then price is going to become more important, partially because it's a lot more visible and easier to compare, and partially because people aren't getting the benefit of those other things. The other reality is that it's still the most expensive channel for many distributors, so they're a heck of a long way from undercharging online in most cases.
Yeah. And Ian, isn't this also just a matter of the communication wrapped around the pricing and the presentation on the website around those services and other kind of aspects of support rather than just the pure product?
Yeah, it's funny, Tom. I went through about 20 websites, actually in several different countries, just to see, on almost always they've got something in there about, a services tab. And you click on it, and on those 20 websites, I put together 200 different services, right? And I wonder how many distributors have looked at all their competitors' websites and then looked at distributors who are in adjacent industries or in different countries and looked at all those value-added services, tried to figure out how valuable those would be to their customers, how well they can deliver them so that they're differentiating, and then rolled that into their ongoing strategy. Because the reality is, all that information's out there. It's free. You just need someone to go and work through it and then build it into your plan. And I think that kind of messaging, if it's truly differentiated, does justify value. Unfortunately, what I mostly see distributors claim is, we have the best people, our people make the difference. Everybody says that. We've been around for a long time. We provide great service. And none of that stuff's differentiating anymore, because it's been so overclaimed that nobody really believes it. And it's just another Me Too set of claims on a website, and frankly, a set of Me Too services that everybody offers. So I think you have to build true differentiation, and there's never been more urgency around that than now.
Thanks, Ian. As a reminder, at the top of the slide that you're looking at right now is a couple of ways to download the handouts here. We will be following up with an email after this, probably within about 24 hours, with a link to the recording as well as these presentations here. But you can go and get the slides right now, either by going to mdm.com/slides or just email us at info@mdm.com. Here's another question. Which are your 3 key advices for a distributor who wants to start selling online?
Yeah, I would say first, get an expert, someone who really understands online selling. And I'm talking about B2B online selling because it's very different than retail. I would say, secondly, have a specific strategy and a financial model for how you're going to sell online. And then third, get the right technology. There are many, many different choices. It's very confusing to people, and it's very easy to overspend, and you need to pick very carefully those systems that are adequate to your needs, have scalability for some reasonable period of time, but you can afford, and when I say you can afford, I'm talking about you can demonstrate on a conservative business case a sufficient return over, say, the next 3 years, maybe less for a small company, that those systems will more than pay for themselves. So I think you've got to engage the right experts because they know how to do all three of those things.
Great, thanks. Is there a website that's doing a great job on messaging around differentiating online price and services, Ian, that you've seen?
Well, it's funny. I was just on Fastenal.com the other day, and they're one of the few websites that not only sells a commodity, like they sell a lot of commodities, but not only do they sell rebar, which almost nobody sells online, but you can actually price it by the inch and put it in your shopping cart by the inch. So this is a custom fabricated quantity, and then check out provided you're logged into a specific branch of theirs. And I think the messaging there is implied in that this is a really robust, fully featured website. So I think there the functionality is carrying the messaging. I would say that in terms of website messaging, the guys over at Real Results Marketing have done a great job evaluating thousands of websites, and they're probably a better source to give you class-leading examples than I am. But if whoever asked that question wants to send me an email, I can put you in touch with them, and I'm sure they'd be able to give you some better examples that I can come up with off the top of my head.
Great. This is a great time also as a reminder. In addition to this webcast, we're putting together a white paper on this survey and some of the recommendations and conclusions coming out of this. So we'll also be following up when that's done here within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it'll be within 2 weeks.
Yep, and be able to get that out. How are distributors handling pricing for shipping and all the different shipping options? Do they go by weight and dimensions of the product, and how do you get accurate specs from manufacturers?
Yeah, great question. So more and more shipping and delivery is going for free, frankly, which to some degree is a problem because distributors are building that into their pricing, and people are not always doing that. Otherwise, frankly, it's been a source of extra margin for a lot of distributors because they get a better price on shipping from common carriers than the end customer does, and so they'll just overcharge the customer versus what it costs them. But I think what's more important than the amount you ship is the ability to give an accurate shipping amount on the transaction when people check out. And those rates are available in feeds from the common carriers. In terms of the weight and dimensions, the reality is you have to put pressure on your suppliers to provide you with accurate product data. That includes transactional data like dimensions and weight, and it also includes product features, et cetera. And that means you need to have a PIM, a product information management system, either as a part of your ERP or there are third-party sources available that you can integrate. And you have to do strategic annual negotiations with your suppliers with strategic buying agreements to ensure that they agree to provide that information up front. In fact, we have a conference next week, and the Monday workshop is about how to craft those kinds of agreements so that you have that information from your suppliers, because it's not optional if you want to succeed online.
Great, Ian. Time for one just final question here. It's a comment really around what we've talked about before in terms of including EDI and B2B portal sales. And the comment here is that it seems like including EDI and these portal sales tiered pricing is a separate conversation from a true e-commerce conversation. One's private one-to-one, the other is an open marketplace. As you're trying to set these goals, the average came out in the 29% 1% of total sales was a goal there. It seems to me there's a lot more segmentation and work to be done around really identifying sort of what those numbers look like.
Yeah, I think a lot of distributors make a mistake by thinking that they should have a goal of selling as much of their sales online as possible. The reality is that you need to drive your strategy based on customer needs, not by some assumption about how much of your revenue should come in through different channels. I think, if your customers want to send you orders by EDI, or they want to send you orders on the web, or they want to send a driver by to pick stuff up, you should do whatever they want to do, but have the capabilities to do it how they want and not artificially create numbers through any channel. And I agree with the question that EDI or e-procurement orders are very different than a traditional e-commerce order. I will say that 20 years ago, when I was at GE Capital, I listened in on a conference call with Michael Dell, who had a very successful, business online at the time. And one of the GE Capital executives said, "Michael, at what point do you just tell customers, you're going to have to buy from me online, we're going to close off the other channels?" And Michael Dell started laughing and he said, "I would never do that. If customers want to send us orders by smoke signal, we're going to take them that way." And I've never forgotten that, and that's why I think these artificial goals, and I want to get 60% of my sales online or whatever, are the wrong thing to do. Take sales through each channel in accordance with how your customers want to place them, but have fully robust capabilities through each of them.
Great way to wrap up. Thank you, Ian. If we didn't get to your question or you have one for our speakers, the emails are here on the screen that you see right now. Please feel free to connect with them with any follow-up. I hope our program today proves helpful to you. Ian and Austin, thank you. I'd also like to thank Oracle NetSuite and Pros for their sponsorship support for this program today as well. We will be sending a link to access a recording of this program. Please feel free to share it with your colleagues. Thank you so much for joining us today, and this concludes our program.